Hello. Quite often I get asked, I get sent messages, people asking what brand of paint do I use, what brand of brushes do I use. I'll get messages saying, well, I'm painting and it's not very good, so can you tell me what paint you use? As if that's going to magically make things better. Now, I know some people who do art, they will use a certain type of paper on the art that they use, or a certain type of pencil. With what I do, I don't really. I make do with whatever I can get and usually end up getting the same results. But I'll show you what I do use. These are the paints. These aren't a brand you're going to be able to get online or anything. I just get these in the local art shop in Liverpool here. And they sell them, and they're a couple of quid each. And I think they're made in Liverpool. They're just a local brand. They're acrylic paint. They come in little things like this. That's actually the name. I mean, look them up, you might be able to find them. I think it's kind of just a generic name though. So they come in, you know, a load of different colours. And I just go and buy them when I run out, or when I've had them long enough that they've gone hard inside and I can't use them anymore. I don't use any particular brand, and I use these just because that's what's there, that's what the local art shop sold. Before I started using these, I also used, I haven't got any examples, normal artists' acrylic paints, like that comes in tubes, like a tube of toothpaste. And I used to use those, and then I saw these and I tried these, and these felt a bit smoother. I don't know if they were, it might have been psychological, but I just liked using these a bit better than the tubes. But in the end you mix them with water and you thin them down to whatever amount you need when you're using them. And I do that different amounts each time depending on what I'm painting and what I want to do. Sometimes I'll want the paint thicker, sometimes I'll want the paint thinner. But I use these. They usually come in glass bottles like that. They've started recently, I guess it's cheaper to make, coming in little plastic ones like that. You can see the difference. But it's the same paint. Now, I also get asked, what colours do you use? I got one only last week asking, that John Watson head that you painted, what colours did you use on it? It's like, oh, I can't tell you that. I don't use specific colours. I don't say, okay, here's skin number 6 and I'll paint that and it'll work. I don't do that. There are a couple of flesh tints that they sell. This one is called tanned flesh. But again, it'll be a different name. If you find different paints, they'll all have different names. But you can kind of see the colour like that. And I usually use that as a base. I will paint that. That is the one colour that I will use flat. I will use that as a base to cover the head that I'm painting, just so it's got a rough skin colour-ish. And then I will start going to work on the highlights and the shadows and the creases and the freckles or skin marks, stubble, all of those kinds of details, subtlety, different changes, the way people's cheeks are a slightly different colour to the nose, and the eye sockets might be a different colour to the forehead. All of those things get done differently, and what I will do is I'll take some of that and I'll mix it either maybe with some plum red, or I'll mix it with a little bit of umber if I'm making shadows, or I will mix it with, there's one called pale flesh, it's like cream basically, and I'll use that to make highlights. But I will mix it with any number of different paints and any number of different combinations to do whatever I need to do, and I'll thin that down with water and paint them on. Now sometimes I'll paint them on with a, excuse me one second, there's a van pulling up outside. I've been waiting for a plumber to turn up today and I think he's about to turn up now. I'm going to pause this, I'll come back. What was I talking about? I'm talking about painting skin colours. Okay, I'll be back in a bit. Hello again, I'm back. The plumber has gone, so I'm here again. Hang on, I've made a coffee. Right, I was talking about painting skin colours. So what I'll do is take the basic flesh colour that I've used just as a base layer, and I will mix it with any one of the colours, and depending on what I'm doing, sometimes I will mix a colour, like if I'm painting the base colour, I'll mix it so it's thinnish but it's still kind of painty, and I'll just paint a layer on. I'll do a few thin layers. I always do it quite thin because then you don't get brush marks, and it's better to do several thin layers than to try and put it all on in one go. So it'll always be thin layers, but sometimes I'll water it down much more than that, and it'll be almost all water, and I will do the different colours and shades and everything. Sometimes I'll take a brush, put the paint on it, brush it all off, and I'll often do it on the back of my hand just so I can see how much paint is coming off the brush, and then dry brush onto the thing, kind of just carefully go a brush. So there's a head that I'm working on. I'll take a brush and I'll rub all the paint off, and then I'll take whatever it is that I'm trying to paint. This is a tiny thing that I'm working on at the moment, a little action figure, and I'll try and just brush shadows or highlights or different colours onto it. It can give a similar effect to something being airbrushed on. It can kind of just make it very cloudy, and there's no hard lines or anything, but you've got to be careful doing that. Most of what I do is watered down paint, painted on, and sometimes I'll paint things on and use my fingers to dab it around. I can use anything. There's no proper rules of, well, you must do it this way and you use a brush. I'll do whatever works. So sometimes I'll paint it on and I'll rub it off with my fingers, and I'll paint a bit more on and rub it off, and you can do anything to get the result. This is the thing, there's no official rules on what to do, just in the same way that there's no official paint. If you took these paints away and gave me different cheaper paints, I'd still get the same results. You work with what you've got. So I'll take the colours, I'll water them down, or I will use, there's a thing called flow enhancer. I'm going to cover this in more detail when I do the tutorial videos that go up on Patreon. But flow enhancer, it basically does the same job as water. It lets you thin the paint down, but it keeps the consistency more like paint. So it thins the pigment down, but it kind of feels like paint still. It's not quite as, water is if you imagine water being the most loose, if you want to call it that, a liquid can be. It's very thin. Paint is always a bit thicker than that. And flow enhancer lets you thin the colour down, so you're not getting as much colour on the face, but it still feels like paint. And sometimes you want that. But what I will normally do is I'll have both of those in front of me. I'll have, that's my water thing. I will have a plastic cup with water in it. I'll have my flow enhancer open, and then when I take a colour and I'll mix the colours on that, every few months I just pull all those paints that build up. You can just peel them off. At the moment it's got a lot of months worth of paint on there, but I'll put the paint on there, I'll dip it into some water, I'll thin it down, I'll dip it into some flow enhancer to get the right consistency that I want, and it's always different. Sometimes I'll want it more watery, sometimes I'll want it less, and I literally just play it by ear and see what feels right. And that's how I work. So there's no particular colours. I mean, there's a bunch of colours that I've got here. Let's see, what colours do I use the most? Tanned flesh, pale flesh, they're all going to be different names. Bright red and plum red. Often I use plum red for doing shadows around the edges of hairlines, cheeks, lips, things like that. Bright red can add a brighter type of red. If you want to do, sometimes lips are a little bit more pink than others. Sometimes cheeks are a bit brighter, it works well on cheeks. Umber works well for shadows. If you're doing stubble, I use this one, which is called Blue Grey, and I just water that down until there's almost no paint in it, and paint that, sometimes with a little bit of umber, and paint that around there, and you get stubble. And I just change that to depending on what I want. So there's a few colours that I use a lot. I will have more in case I need them, but I can usually paint any one of my heads, like the John Watson one, and I can use, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paints, 6 or 7 colours, and I'll do the whole head with that, and I would just be mixing all the colours with all the other colours depending on what I want to do. I mean, sometimes I'll mix the tanned flesh with a red and then mix some blue into that to get a purple colour, and that works well for doing shadows or painting little, if you want little tiny details on the skin to make it look like there's veins and things underneath. So lots of different colours. The brushes I use, I've got a load of different brushes. I've got some here, I've got a load elsewhere, but if I'm honest with you, I probably do most of my work, let's see, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. Okay, these are the brushes I use the most. Sometimes that one, but let's say definitely, get that out of the way so you can see them. Those ones. There's no particular brand, there's no particular type of brush. I literally just, when they're wearing out and I'm thinking they're looking a bit old now, I need some new ones, I go into the art shop, I walk around, they've got like a big wall full of different brushes, oil brushes, acrylic brushes, watercolour brushes, and I'll usually find the bit where they've got things for sale and see what they've got the cheapest and what do I think will work for me. There's no set things. This brush, you can see the size of it, it's starting to be worn out, it's a bit thicker now. It's usually quite flat, but it's a round tipped flat brush. I don't know what it's called. This is the thing, filbert. It's called a filbert brush. Anyway, that is what I will use for putting the base colours. So that base tanned flesh, I will use umber, the dark brown, and just do a base layer of hair, which I will then do highlights and shadows and streaks and everything on. So I use that for those. I then go on to a smaller one, but not tiny, which it doesn't matter if it gets a bit worn out, this one, because this is for putting down thin layers of shades and colours and detail and variation. I'll mix thin watery things with this and I'll just put them on and I'll dab them with my finger, and I just use that one for putting on most of the build up of layers and colours and shades and everything. That's the one that builds up everything the most. If I'm doing any dry brushing, like if I'm doing one where I want a certain colour on a cheek and I don't want to paint it with water, I just kind of want to almost brush it on, I'll do that, which was a longer brush, but I got a pair of scissors and cut it off, so it's got quite a wide area on the top, and I'll use that and I'll get the paint and I'll just, almost like putting makeup on, so I'll brush off most of the paint, but it's not watery because that gives a very different effect. I'll brush it all off so it's almost dry, and then I'll use that to do makeup. I could probably do makeup, you know. I should try that one day. Anyway, so that's what I use, but I don't do that much. And then I've got the one where I'm doing eyeballs, tiny details. Eyeballs, eyebrow hairs, stuff like that is, let me take the top off this because I keep this one protected. Little tiny thin one. Camera won't focus, but that's a little teeny tiny pointy one, and I have a few of them. And I just buy a few of whatever they have in stock, of whatever size, that seem to be small and pointy enough. And I look at them and go, yeah, I could paint eyes with that, and that's it. So I never go back saying, I need a number 0. I don't have any set things. I just go by what they've got in front of me, what's cheapest, what I think will work. And that's kind of what I use. So for anyone who was thinking of asking, what paint do you use and how can I paint better by using different paints? I don't know, and honestly for me it doesn't work like that. If you have a certain set of colours, what will happen is over time you'll realise, well, I could do a better effect if I had a different purple colour. And you will find out that mixing a certain colour blue will work for you. Or you'll realise, well, the red that I've got is a bit too bright, it's a bit too orangey, I want a deeper red. And you'll either mix your own by adding some other colours in, or you'll find a new red. And over time you'll get a small core set of colours that you use, and you'll just get better by doing it. It's just practice. You do what you do anyway, and over time you just learn different ways to do it. And if I look back at the work that I was doing when I started this, which is 2006 or something like that, I look at those heads I painted then, they're horrible. I hate them so much. It's like, oh no, don't anyone look at those. But I look at the ones that I'm painting now and I'm thinking, God, they're actually quite good, aren't they? And you do get better. And that just is a natural progression. That happens over time. So yeah, that's it. No particular brands, no particular makes, no particular names, just whatever paint you can get. These are acrylics though, that's the one thing I do use. Some people use oil paints. I've done oil paint on canvas. I've never used them on heads. Acrylics that get watered down and a few brushes to do it with. And that's kind of it. So I'm going to leave you with that. I will go into all of this probably in much more detail when I do the tutorials, because when I have finished this thing that I'm working on now, I'm going to be filming the next 1 or 2 heads that I've got, and I will be painting and talking and explaining what I'm painting and why I'm doing it a certain way. And I'll do probably hour-long videos, I don't know how many it's going to be, explaining the whole process. So it might be a load of them, I've no idea yet. And they'll go up on Patreon. But for now, that's a short version of what paints I use. Because I get emails and messages all the time asking me what paints I use, what brushes I use. There you go, it's a very simple acrylics. I could have done this video. This whole video could have been me going, acrylics, and it would have been done. But there you go, I've explained it a little bit so you know kind of why I do what I do. I'm going to go because I've got work to do and I've got a coffee to drink, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.